and I've really tried to help others. And she patted me on the leg, and she said, "Yes, my dear, I know." And we went right on with enjoying the rest of the time she had to live. And it was enough. She knew that I knew that she knew. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't need, thank God, I talked to a member that's been in his fellowship for a long time, because I would have gone and laid out all that old stuff. And at that point in time in life, she didn't need to hear it. Mm-hmm. Right, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jill. Don't need to add a thing to that. Okay.
I have a question about, I'm working with some people right now, and they've had things happen to them in their childhood, which they had no control over, but they have a great hatred towards these people as adults. Do they have to make amends to those people for their whole life, hating them?
I always like to. We strive for progress, not perfection. I always like to gauge stuff by the level of disability, and you know what I mean by that. There, everybody has got some grievances and stuff. Sometimes they go to a level where they are genuinely disabling in quality of relationships or stuff like that. To me, that's the action point. And sometimes it does. It's like the book says that we can't hesitate to go just because of circumstances, that we need to push through. And so, there's no obviously no pat thing on that. But that's what I look at. I look at the level I call it the level of disability. And that applies to a whole bunch of stuff, but I think it certainly applies there. A lot of things like you're talking about, I think, are places where I like to get a skilled professional involved. Particularly if you're talking about young, that because there's a lot of trauma in that, there's a lot of difficulty. And one of the things I learned a long time ago in this fellowship is to recognize when I'm in over my head. And so I'm pretty thoughtful about not pushing into where there may be a need for some outside stuff. And so that's basically what I do. That's a very sensitive thing you're talking about, though. Very sensitive. And sometimes we'll blunder in and blurt out something about how to deal with that, and I've seen some real tragedy come from that. Yeah.
My question is, making an amend and with the perhaps, as you're saying, the wrong expectation that you should be getting something back, and you don't, and it starts up another resentment. Even when you recognize where the resentment is coming from, how do you square this in your own mind? How do you get this resentment removed? You don't have to involve the same people again, or do you?
You're talking about the resentment you have towards somebody?
Yes, because they did not respond in the way that you thought they should when you made your amendment.
Well, I tend to get cold-blooded sometimes. When I have done my best, I'm done. And then it becomes the other guy's problem. So if I make amends the best I know how, and genuinely try to make right that wrong, my responsibility stops there. And so I would really question myself if I were still hanging on to it, because the outcome doesn't condemn the action. That just because the other person didn't respond. It's like, go back to what I was saying about that old timer that I'm messing with because he hadn't done any amends. He really didn't understand that because he sent that money to his daughter and the daughter didn't respond, that he wasn't making amends. So I said, after we got through talking about it, I said, well, let me ask you to do this. He travels a fair amount. I said, when you travel, send her a postcard from Jekyll Island. Hi, I'm in Jekyll, just thought about you. And I said this, don't tell your story. Don't tell her a whole bunch of stuff. Say hello. I was thinking about you. Enough said. See, what I'm talking about is him What he's amending is his relationship to the daughter. That's what I want him to fix. And if he will amend his being walled off, doesn't even have a daughter, his life is just kind of bitterly surrounded with that kind of junk, I want him to get out of that. And so what I want him to do is to reach out to the daughter and not look for an answer. And if she ever answers, fine. If not, it won't take away from his attempt to be a father. A little late in the game, but at least he's making the effort. And that's the amend that counts. And whether there's reciprocation, it's nice if there is, but sometimes there isn't. If there isn't, it doesn't diminish the quality of the amend. If you're doing that thing straight up, you're doing that thing as honest as you can with no manipulative thoughts about it, it'll have its value. And that's kind of the way I like to look at it. It really is our side of the street. Of course, it affects other people, but the primary function is to get these cancers out of my soul, so that I can breathe free. And so it's a kind of a hard-nosed thing in a way, about drawing a line on that. Anybody else? Yeah.
I just wanted to say real quick that I came to my first AA meeting when I was 16, and at the age of 33, I was with the sponsor that took me through, I had done 4, 5, 6, and 7 probably, I don't know how many times, but had never continued through 8 and 9. Mm-hmm. And after getting hooked up with the sponsor and doing 8 and 9, that freedom and that thought of the drink finally left me after that many years. Yeah. And it was so important of that forgiveness all around of, I just can't say how much the steps 8 and 9 meant. Mm-hmm. And after 17 years, just really struggling. And so please, everybody, make sure your sponsees get to the 8th and 9th steps.
Thank you very much.
With that.
Yeah, great to share. Great to share. Yeah.
Hi, I just wanted to make one comment. You said it kind of in passing in one of the earlier ones, and I think it was the only really important piece of advice I think I ever got that was outside the book. And it really is. But as you're making the list, what is truly important is to, what I was told was to write the harm next to each of the names, and that I should try to identify exactly what the harm was. Mm-hmm. Because, like you said, I thought it would be the entire phone book. Yeah. It was everybody I ever came in contact with, and that's not true. But it really clears up exactly what it is. They talked to me about an example that they gave was that beginning to pay your child support is not amends. Paying the back child support is amends. And it's important to begin to understand those differences.
You bet.
So that it really helps in the process, and it clears up some of the questions that come along.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim. I tell you one other thing. We'll wrap. I believe we're on time. Just about 2 minutes over. I went out in Texas a while back. I was at a little conference, and I saw a beautiful Jag sitting there. And so I went over to admire the car, and it had a stick, one of those plates on the front said Step 9. I said, I got to meet this boy. So I hunted him down, and I said, tell me about your tank. And what he was doing, what many of us do, that say, well, it starts with me. Yeah. And I guarantee you that nothing in Step 9 says about making amends to me. It's about getting my life straight with this world. And but sometimes you see people got up there. Now it's time for me. I got to look after me and all this stuff and make amends to me. That's what the whole program does. That's what the process does. But if I get obsessed with trying to fix me, thank you very much. I'll see you at dinner.
I just want to say one thing for the people that are just beginning. You can really get dangerous and fly off the handle. It's so important to have a good sponsor in this particular one because they can see the trees from the forest and they can weed out things where we are emotionally involved in certain things and they don't understand. but they do because they can see it better than us. So I can't emphasize how important this particular time an important sponsor is. Even if it's not one sponsor, two people to tell you how they're going to react or not react. Because we really go off the handle on this one, and we shouldn't.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks very much. Yeah. See you at the hamburger place. I don't know if I'm on. Is this on? It doesn't sound like it to me. My hearing is going, I think. Well, good morning, and it's good to see you. Bright-eyed and frisky, and have survived so far. Really are looking good this morning. I want to do something that Jill said she had the big book over there waiting for me all weekend. I never did use it, but I looked over there once in a while for inspiration, and then when she took it away, I said, "Where's the big book?" What we'll do this morning, and I'll try not to interfere with the brunch. I'm sorry you told me about that brunch. I can't go. And I bet that is a killer over there. By the way, my family, on the day of my 45th anniversary, my family had made me promise to stay in town, and to celebrate it, they took me over to the Carolina Hotel in Pinehurst, which is about like the club here, for the champagne brunch. Boy, you guys got a lot of class. You really know how to honor sobriety. I was sitting there watching them drink. Totally repulsive. They put orange juice in champagne. Well, that's sick. That is absolutely sick. That's the truth. It's absolutely a killer. Whatever it takes. Anyway, we had a good time. I tried to get some of them to join, but they wouldn't. Everybody turned me down. What we'll do this morning is what's on the agenda. For one, is go through 10, 11, and 12, and then and also sort of finish the rest of the story a little bit. But I want to do it in the context of those. That's what I've tried to do all along, is kind of take a look at what puts the life together, and then this morning take a look at what happens in sobriety. Just like I mentioned when I acknowledged that anniversary, that truly was the darkest day of my life, and nobody could have ever told me that it would open up a brand new life that was beyond imagination. No way. But there's I think a direct correlation between darkest day and new beginning. Because folks who don't start on a dark day tend to have all sorts of questions about, the real legitimate need. And so I guess it's a very logical kind of a connection to that thing, and it surely was the way. Where we finished off last night was finishing up on amends, and I want to pick up with I don't normally do a lot of reading, but I want to do just a little bit of reading because I have a hunch that it's relevant. What page of the promise is on? 83 and 84. As much as I've heard that. Now, she said the pages are different, but these are right. They didn't screw up the promises. I want to start here because I think there's an awfully important kind of transition when we get through that very, very serious and demanding work of inventory and amends, and then we take a look at something that says we're going to shift gears, and those promises are there, and the way those things are worded, and then I want to go through step 10 because I think it has critical value in really becoming long-term recovered alcoholics. Critical relationship. And in the promises, we read them at meetings. A lot of times we read stuff at meetings, and it sort of gets, we don't hear it. It just kind of glides by because we hear it so much. But it's talking about when we finish those amends, and that requires more than one visit. You know that. That it's when we finish the amend. And what it says, if we're painstaking about this phase of our development, we'll be amazed before we're halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. And that's before we even finish. That's about halfway through the deal. Saw a hand go up. Oh, she said no. Okay. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we've gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of useless and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. If you want to know how you're doing so far, and you're in the process, read the promises and see how they ring with you. It's a good check en route. Are things starting to happen? Or is that self-obsession getting away? Am I starting to have spiritually driven motives? Am I starting to think of others instead of just constantly about me? Promise is a real good place to take a check. Sometimes we read them like they're sort of like getting a chip at the end of an anniversary. That you do something and this stuff just magically happens. But it qualifiers in there. If we're painstaking, meaning thorough, going at it, tooth and nail, doing the deal, straight up and honest, we'll be amazed before we're halfway through. And so at that interim, where do we go from there? In step 10, to me, I don't usually talk about it in this context, but it struck me a little bit when I was sort of getting ready for this. Step 10 really is slip prevention stuff to me. It's slip prevention. It's not a continuation of the amends process necessarily. It's slip prevention. And so I want to go through step 10. It's a short thing, and actually it'll be shorter than me trying to anecdotally get at it, because it takes me forever to do it. So listen to step 10 from the context of slip prevention, and then let's talk about that a little bit. This thought, it finishes off promises. These extravagant promises, we think not. They're being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. Now, that's a given. If I screw up, to straighten it out, and to not let it linger, to deal with it quickly so that the rudder stays straight. So it's got a very, very good caretaker quality to it for sure. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up our past, in a direct relationship to that business of amends. And as we clean up the past, we're ready to move forward. What makes a bold new day? What makes a bright new beginning? It isn't wreckage of the past being cleared out. It's what comes in the future. So we vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleared up the past. We have entered the world of the Spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. How many folks that spend all their time in Alcoholics Anonymous checking their emotional pulse? We need to get beyond that, don't we? So we've entered the world of the Spirit. Our function now is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. It's not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. Continue, and here's where I think some of the slip stuff comes in. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for a lifetime. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. A lot harder to find than who I insulted today. When I start looking underneath that, Where do I start cropping up the old behaviors, the old attitudes, the old feelings? And there's where trouble starts. You ever notice this? If you've been around long enough, you've seen it. A slip starts at least 6 months before the drink. At least. You know, the things like I experienced on that airplane, slips rarely happen that way. Didn't happen that way with me. They rarely happen that way. Slips normally happen at least 6 months, and they happen long before the drink. And the strange thing, the dilemma is that you've seen it 100 times. You can see it coming, and you're baffled about how to deal with it. I don't care who you are. Yeah. Dave and I and Jerry were talking about how you deal with people that are a little off the wall. Now, everybody can recognize it. Everybody can recognize a lousy attitude. But how do you deal with it? What's the fine line between helping and meddling? Guys, in our group, we had a workshop a while back on working with others. And normally you'd think about, well, let's go out and call it on drunks. But we put it into 4 categories and just sort of beat on it for 3 or 4 hours. In a cold building with no heat. A bunch of brilliant alcoholics didn't have enough sense to turn the heater off. We couldn't figure it out. So we sat in there in cold weather, not a soul left because it was a really commanding agenda. And the 4 categories that we did was, one was doing 12-step calls. How do you call on folk? And then we added something. How do you get the family involved in the process? We so often overlook that. And we'll walk right past somebody who probably suffered more than the alcoholic and go to the drunk. And overlook the fact that it's a family illness. And if you don't address the family situation, you're only taking half measures at that do. So we talked about the criticality of that. How do you get family involved in this process? We talked about how you deal with the baggage. Now, everybody brings baggage. It's different baggage. Some folks are broke. Some people got a blue light behind them. Somebody got a judge gavel over their head. Somebody's got a wife that they can't stand to listen to anymore, or a husband. Everybody brings some baggage. Litigation pending, lawsuits, may go to jail, whatever. Job's going to be gone. How do you deal with the baggage? Ignore it? Yeah, our book gives us some guidance about it, that it's good to help, but it's critically important to know when to help. You ever notice how you can sabotage sobriety if you bail out instead of help? Fine line. When do you give some money? How do you handle money? When do you take somebody in your house? When do you contact the judge? When do you intervene with a... All of those are issues that come up. And how we do it, pretty important. Turn a blind eye to it and say, well, we don't mess with stuff like that. Interesting when you start looking at the relationship and how we work with folks and how we help instead of meddle or screw up. The other one that was kind of relates to what I was directly talking about that all relates, but directly relates, is when you're seeing somebody that you know is headed for trouble, what do you do? Now, most of us do nothing. We back off and tell somebody else, Bruce is headed for trouble. Somebody ought to do something. Yeah, that's right. Somebody needs to do something. But it's always awkward. And after we talked about that thing, that is not the answer, but what we concluded was that the action we took and the person who took the action directly depended on the level of trust established. If you've got a genuine, trusting relationship with an alcoholic, there's no limit to what you can say to them. Absolutely none. But if you don't have that trusting relationship, you hurry up and believe there's some limits to what you can say. And so it's a critical thing about slips, just from the standpoint of dealing with it. And the point is that not only that, but that 10th step is slip prevention. It's not just about peace of mind. It's about being mindful of those old behaviors and those old attitudes and those old feelings growing up again. Repairing the damage and making it positive, that's the easy part of it. The other, the more subtle thing for us is what happens on the inside. You know, when we start changing and feeling differently and stop being spirit-driven. And so 10 is an awfully important place for me. I'm old-fashioned is one reason I say slip. The other reason I say slip is that relapse is almost a non-judgmental term. It's almost like you'll hear the language, if you're patient enough to listen to it, you'll hear the language that relapse is inevitable. Well, that's just flat wrong. That is flat wrong. Relapse is not inevitable. I know me and thousands of other people who've never had a drink since they walked in here. And so I like to be kind of careful about the language I apply. Slip means that I am not doing the things that I need to do. Alcoholism is one of the most highly treatable illnesses in the world. But the medicine's pretty doggone demanding. The medicine's demanding. And the responsibility's mine. And so that's the real importance to me about step 10 is to keep this thing steady, so that I don't go back into the old and I can continue to be open to the new life, and to let that new life happen. And if I'm spending all my time with little turf battles and stuff like that and attitudes and things, I'm not going anywhere. And so I'm the loser in that process. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. And listen to the therapy of this now. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. We discuss them with someone. This was before sponsors were invented. And so they meant sponsors there, I think. And make amends quickly if we've harmed someone. Then here's the therapy to me. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code. So rather than reflecting on the morbidity of the problem and how devastating this was, what we do is find a new drunk. And it's not unusual at all for me to be working with somebody. And, well, the guy that led this, he probably talked about it down here, the guy that led this retreat a couple of years ago. When I first started sponsoring it, I thought, Keith, the first thing that he tried to discuss with me was what form his next fourth step ought to be. And so I asked him how long he'd been sober, and it was something like 15 years or something, yeah. And I thought a minute. I didn't want to start out with an abrasive relationship. I said, let me suggest something else. He said, what? Hey, go find a new guy. I mean, hell, man, you don't need to be into analysis paralysis at this point. Well, you'll be doing studying your navel over something. Go to work, go do something. And he did. Anyway, the therapy here is to go do something. Take some action. Don't just get into sort of figuring it all out. We cease fighting anyone, anything or anyone, even alcohol. Real tricky language in this thing. That's not it, but we're coming to it. For by this time, sanity will have returned. Hopefully. We will seldom be interested in liquor. I just happen to know that 12 people bought drinks on that plane. I wasn't interested. That was sort of a scientific thing. I was, but if tempted, we recoil from it as if from a hot flame. The better news is that we get to the point that it don't make a heck of a lot of difference. Yeah, don't have to recoil. It just ain't no big deal. You know, I enjoyed watching those rookies mess with that champagne. I was a little hurt they put that stupid orange juice in there, but that's their problem. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. And this is the tricky part right in here. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part, except maybe those first 9 steps, that might have been a little bit of effort on our part. It just comes. Now that almost sounds like magical thinking, that all I got to do is keep coming back and don't worry about it. It'll sort of take me over and give me the rapture or something. Don't kid yourself. It's just been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. We're not fighting it. Neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We've not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We're neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. Now, amazing how many people stop right there. Amazing how many people think, "Finis, she's all done. That sucker's gone and it won't be back." Dangerous thinking, I believe. Because we don't read the next line and the next paragraph. That is how we react, so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. You know anybody that's in fighting shape 24 hours a day? My God, I'm as active in AA as anybody I know. I have times I get frustrated. I have times I get aggravated. I get discouraged. I get upset. I get fearful. All kinds of things happen. And it's hard to be a spiritual giant when you're sort of challenged at times. So I'm a human. And so there are going to be times when the spiritual condition won't be the magic shield. But it's there, it's accessible, and what I need to know that it's my resource. And it's where I go when I'm in trouble, like on that plane. Left to my own devices, I would have died drunk. Left to my own devices, I would have taken that drink. The spiritual power was sufficient. It's important for me to know that what I've been given is not a pardon. I've been given a reprieve. A reprieve. And so as long as I keep in fit spiritual condition, that I can handle the things that come my way, everything will be okay. Everything will be okay. Doesn't mean I'm in desperation, but it does mean that I'm aware. I'm aware. I have tended folk longer than me in sobriety who forgot that. And they have taught me invaluable lessons the hard way. So I never get away from the notion that even though we have a good time and even though my life is unbelievably good, we're dealing with a killer illness and it'll take me out of here in a heartbeat. All I have to do, I don't have to do anything to cause it. All I have to do is let up and look who's banging on my door. It's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We are headed for trouble if we do. For alcohol's a subtle foe. I don't have to go hunt it. It'll come to me. Alcohol's a subtle foe. We're not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve, and this is vital language to me. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. How can I best serve Thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line, and all we wish. It's the proper use of the will. Marvelous step. Marvelous prevention step. Marvelous thing to help me understand that we move into the active phase of recovery, where we start practicing this exuberantly as a way of life, where we start finding our solution in other people. And so it's a critical transition. Certainly there are practical things in there about the daily spot checks and on behavior and all that, but those are the openers. And the real issue for me is how do I keep in fit spiritual condition so that I can comfortably engage in life. And when I'm on my game, there is little in this world that can rattle me when I'm on my game. And you let me get into that sort of shaky kind of business, I'm as vulnerable as anybody in the world. And so I've got a powerful, powerful way of life if I use it. But if I just try to put that sucker on cruise control and drop in for a little fix once in a while, I ain't kidding nobody but myself. So very, very important for me to practice this as a way of life, and then it becomes a way of life. That's tough. I hit that kind of heavy. It sounded like a Baptist preacher, but I don't mean to be vehement, but I mean to be clear with what my beliefs are. That we lose a lot of members. We lose more than we keep. And I don't think losing members is an accident. I think it's a product of not being thorough in taking the actions that are laid out. I have never, so far, to my knowledge, I have never had anybody that I was working close with personally that was doing the work in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous who has drunk again. Never had one. It doesn't happen. It's when we start getting diverted and getting off and pull in and get pulled into 1,000 different directions. But if I'm doing this thing, I've never lost one. I mean, I know we lose a lot of folks because it's a tough illness. But to me, that simple little couple of paragraphs there are critical about how some people say we move into maintenance, and that's nice, but it's a too weak word to me. Maintenance means just sort of keeping what I got. I think this is about growth. It's about starting a new life, about having the things that fire our imagination, that bring on creativity, that stimulate, that enthuse, that invigorate. I think that's what comes here, not just how to maintain a sort of pablum existence. I couldn't do that. I'm not interested in a pablum existence. I have a sneaking hunch that a person, now everybody's not going to be a Tom Ivester. I think a program of recovery has to fit your pattern of drinking. I was not a sedentary drinker. I wasn't somebody who just sort of settled into a comfortable place and swizzled a mint julep. That wasn't exactly my style. I was a guy, when I started to drink, something going to happen. I guarantee you something's going to happen. I'm going to make it happen if I have to, but something's going to happen. I was not looking for the Twilight Zone. I was looking for downtown. I wanted noise. I wanted action. I wanted stuff. I wanted trashy people. I didn't want. And so, wouldn't it be dumb for a guy who's geared like me to go to a little study group once a week? Sit there and nuance words. I'd be brain dead in a week. I tell you, I could not do it. I got to have action. One little story. I got to be careful here, but how long is it? I'll just tell you what. A good buddy of mine, fine man, and I just respect him an awful lot. And his father was almost one of the first 100 in AA, so he has a legacy in the program second to none. And he was either blessed or cursed with a lot of stuff. You know, he just got a lot of stuff over the years and became a pretty comfortable fellow. And he's still a good man. He's a good friend. But he just kind of drifted away. You know, somebody was talking about last night about what happens to old timers. And this fellow with a legacy like his, he just kind of drifted into nirvana somewhere. And I heard he had trouble. He had a cancer operation. And so I just went over to make a house call on him and say howdy and just see my buddy. And it's funny how when people are in reverse, they have to explain it. So I didn't ask him anything. I mean, I wasn't saying, "Where you been, guy? We're over here to audit you. We're going to take your card." I wasn't attacking him like that. I just visited. And well, how you doing? He said, "I guess you wonder where I've been." I said, "Well, I miss you. Where have you been?" So he started telling. He said, "You're still real active, aren't you?" I said, "Man, you better believe it." And he said, "I've gone a different path." And I said, "Well, God, isn't that interesting? What's the path?" And he said, "Well, I've kind of gotten into this thing where I meet with some other people and we study the Word." Well, I mean, how are you going to argue with that? Yeah, I said, "Well, geez, that must be interesting, and you learn a lot of stuff." And he said, "Well, why do you keep doing what you do?" And I said, "Well, I've taken a look at that Word also. But what it tells me is that if you're interested in what we're about, go take care of the sheep. It doesn't say become a genius about the Word and how to have 9 synonyms for good. It says go do something. You know, stand around and tell me how wonderful I am. Go help somebody." And that's what drives me. And so it's a different trail. Eh? Now, he might have been a guy that just sort of sat in one little place and sipped. I don't know. But now I couldn't do that. You know? And so I think the wrench has to fit the nut. You know? So I'm not trying to get Ivester lookalikes here. I would only tell you this, that 45 years later, I'm as enthused about this sucker as I was 45 years ago. And so there's something that ain't all bad about it, I tell you that. So anyway, I think that's what this is about. It's about shifting it from a me agenda and then getting a bigger kind of a thing. Learning that the greatest stuff I do, I'm the winner. I promise you that we're not competing, but I've been as busy as anybody I know in Alcoholics Anonymous for as long as anybody I know. And I honestly believe I'm the most rewarded man in the United States of America. I truly believe that. And it's real. I'm not some dedicated idiot out here doing missionary work. I'm greedy, man. I love the things that come my way when I'm trying to do God's will the best I know how. And I've had people for 40 years been telling me that I ought to do it different. Most of them don't last long, but most of them want me to do less, cut it down, be quieter with it, or something like that. And the old boy was, I know he cares about me, and he means well. The meathead was talking to me one day. He's down, "Thomas, you have got to slow down, boy. You're getting on up there, and you can't carry this pace." And so I listened to him very patiently, and I said, "Well, let me just ask you a question." I said, I've been sober 44 years. I've finished a career at the top of my profession. I make more money quit than I made working. Got more than I need. Married to the same woman 33 years, even though she's weird. She's mine. 33 years. Got 2 kids that have done pretty well. They're both goofy, but One of them went into psychology, and the other one became a physician, and they're both just out there. But I'm intensely proud of those folks. Yeah, just went on. I just sort of laid out a litany of what God's given me. I said, "What do you suppose I ought to change?" He said, "Oh, you know what I mean." I said, "Yeah, sure. I could slow down, and maybe I could be like you." I only 12-stepped him about 25 times here, so I'm surely going to take him on as a counselor. So, the point is that here we have to find our own way. We don't try to clone folk in Alcoholics Anonymous. Everybody's going to find the program that fits them. My great fear is that in working with people is that it not be a program that just sort of fits my idiosyncrasies, but one that fits my metabolism, fits my energy, fits my makeup, fits my reality. I know people with young kids. Well, I was a people with young kids, and it creates some real challenges in this. So don't mistake what I'm saying. That everybody doesn't have to be a Lucifer out here chasing around. As long as we're doing what it's saying right here, I think we're in good, solid ground. And then 10:30 we quit. 10:40. Cheated me out 10 minutes. 10:30. No, we'll quit at 10:30 because I want y'all to go eat that brunch. And think about me while you're eating now. I swear, that's pitiful. Come down, all I got was a fat hot dog. But I never have dealt with 10 quite like that. But that's a. I'm gonna have to think about that some. I just heard that for the first time. That's got some weight to it, I think. So I'm gonna revisit that. 11. A lot of times we look at 11 like it's a kind of go to the mountain and think type of step. But for my money, 11 is the strongest action step in Alcoholics Anonymous. Strongest action. I think it does the most specific job of getting us channeled into the route that's rightfully ours. What I'm talking about is this. I believe, at least it's been what I've observed most of the time, I believe that any of us who do this program of recovery, who take the actions laid out, that in our recovery an avenue of service will open to us. An avenue of service will open to us. I think it comes in the context of the 11th step, if not before. But an avenue of service will open, and I'll know it when it comes. And God only knows what it'll be. But there'll be a time when your talents, your experience, whatever you bring to the table will be called to service. I think it's a natural product of what we do. When we start praying for God's will, if we listen, we're going to get it. We're going to hear it. And it may come in the form of somebody saying, "Hey, make the coffee." But you're going to hear it. It's my personal belief, just mine, but it's surely mine, that the quality of my recovery will directly depend on how I respond to that opening for service. I personally believe that the quantity of my recovery will depend on it. I really believe that if we don't get to a point where this becomes a way of life, where we are a channel for what we're given to pass it on to others, that it's going to die, And what will happen, even if we survive, we shortchange ourselves. We get shortchanged in the real payoffs that come from Alcoholics Anonymous. And so when I think about 11th step, certainly there are a lot of kind of things in there that are important about improving my conscious contact with God. Yeah, I mentioned about my sort of bizarre picture of what that meant when somebody said they were God conscious or they were that kind of stuff. I thought they were robots. I really could not relate to that. It was so far away from me, it was pitiful. And now I'm one of them. But it really doesn't sound that way with me. I mean, it's because it's in my head. But my spiritual life, my AA life, my spiritual life is in everything that I do. Everything that I do. Nothing that occurs in my life doesn't, like some people when they come in AA have some trouble with sort of sorting out things. That it's a little bit like what we were talking about before, that some people have real trouble knowing when to stop and start. How to get a balance, so that we got appropriate investment of time in places. Yeah, and sometimes people we get hung up with this notion of so many hours of this, so many hours of that, and so many hours of this. It's a kind of mechanical way to work, and AA won't fit a box like that. And the reason for it to me is that AA does not compete with anything in my life. Absolutely nothing. Now, there are times when my wife may think it's competing a little bit, but it doesn't compete with my basic responsibilities. Alcoholics Anonymous is a way of life. It's a way of life. And if it isn't in full effect on my job, then it isn't in effect. If it isn't in effect in my marriage, it isn't in effect in my citizenship, on and on. And so it's not really a matter to me of splitting up time. It's recognizing that Alcoholics Anonymous is part of everything else. My belief is, as busy as I've been, and my family have never known me anything but sober. My wife never saw me drink. My kids obviously never did, and they've adapted to this way of life. If it doesn't make me better in every area of my life, I'm not right. And as busy as I've been, if there's anything in my family that has been negatively impacted, I don't know it. I don't know it. Anything in my work. Even though I travel most weekends of the year, my organization would never schedule meetings on Friday with me in them because they knew I wouldn't be there. And so, my God, you got 4 other days, and it always worked out. Everybody worked with me. That it will work if I am practicing it in the places that I go. And important that it be spiritual principles and not just sort of manipulative thinking. That very important that I practice the principles of my marriage, the principles of my profession, but Alcoholics Anonymous is what makes that go. Amazing how much I have used this in business. I'll guarantee you that I've used it far more in business management than I've ever used anything I learned in college. Far and away. I have solved more organizational problems with the traditions of AA. Now, I don't put them on the table and read them, but I use them. I was in a meeting one day, and they were trying to do a government merger of something, and I had vehement opposition to that, and I was outnumbered badly. And so I said to the group, "Are you familiar with the principle of autonomy?" Everybody looked blank. They had some notion of what the definition of autonomy. And so I explained it, just like I would in an AA meeting. Autonomy. That means that two things can be very helpful to each other, but you don't absorb each other. What you do is link and cooperate. You link where the association is helpful. Well, now, had I tried to explain that from the logic of budget and management and all this kind of stuff, they'd have knocked me out. Instead, I headed off a government merger that I honestly believe was a bad deal, using nothing but the fourth tradition. And so that's what I'm talking about. It's a matter of using principles deliberately, using the spirit of, what's happened to me professionally. Certainly I got my training to do what I did. I was educated in correctional administration. That certainly had a lot to do with the legitimacy of my. But I'll tell you this: I progressed in the system faster than my preparation. The only reason I got prepared was to catch up with where I was. I got tired of being the dumbest guy in the room. But the spiritual drive is what propelled me in what I did. And so this whole business about 11, in terms of finding the close relationship with Spirit, more importantly, of making that an active part of what I do. We sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. But an absolute ticket for action. And if I'm open to it, opportunities come. People a lot of times ask me how I got started doing something like this. It's a story in itself. I've looked this crowd over. There is not a person in this crowd that is less comfortable than I was in my first year of sobriety. There's not a person in this crowd that's not more verbal than I was in my first year. If anybody had ever told me I would get up in front of a group and do anything, I'd have said, "You smoking something." I ain't going. There is no way. I could not have done it. The first time I ever got up in front of a crowd, and I'm talking about how God's will, if I let this Spirit carry me, it'll take me places I wouldn't go. The first time that group I was in, the elected officers, it's almost like a political campaign. I mean, you had to run for something. And they beat on me to run for librarian. We had a little bit of material and I had a librarian job. And I wanted to do something, but I was scared slammed to death. And I knew I couldn't make any campaign speech. So the time came, I got up in front of the group and I said, "Fellas, I'd like to be your librarian." Now that was the least eloquent speech by far. But you know what happened. We respond to that. We respond to sincerity. We respond to honesty. And they knew I wasn't shucking the jive, and I was too scared. And just when I look back and look at those steps, the only reason that I've ever moved into doing anything like what I do is I have a willing heart, and I don't say no. And I'll guarantee you, if you've got those two factors, you're going to do some service. Because people will feel that, and they will absolutely, if you've got those two things, get ready. Because you're going to do it. And I never have said no to a genuine request for service since I've been in AA. And people ask me how many times I go somewhere, how many times I do something. Easy. How many times am I asked? That's how many times I do it. If I have the time, I use it. If I don't have the time, I don't, of course, But I don't say no. Never once have I said no on the basis of personal comfort or convenience. That's a big difference. Now, I don't just agree to every little frivolous thing somebody said, "Hey, why don't you go do that?" No. If it's a genuine request for service, if the time's available, I'm not going to say no. Simply because, kind of like I was telling that meathead, that ever since I took on a new manager, my life has worked beyond anything I could have possibly imagined. Ain't no way that I'm going to take that dude back over. Yeah, I'm sponsoring a young anesthesiologist, and he good guy. He just got himself confused with the patients a little bit and got in an awful lot of trouble. And he was a bad drunk, and he was just sucked up. Well, anyway, he was bad. When I met that fellow, he's 7 years now. He's a marvelous fellow. He's just a flake. He was a bad flake. And he got in the group, and he started coming along, and he was getting ready to be 2 years sober. And I said, we were having breakfast with him. I said, well, big guy, you got a nice deal coming up this weekend. He said, what? He always acts like he's in awe of something. He says, what? I said, well, your 2 years is coming up Saturday night. He said, oh, my God. I said, what's the problem? He said, I can't be there. And I said, well, that's too bad. I said, what's the problem? He said, well, now he was in that capture a doc program, you know, where you either submit or die, you know. So he was captured. And he said, the Medical Associated States having their ball, and if I don't go, they'll know I'm drunk, and I have got to go, man. It's obligatory. They're all there. I said, well, that really is too bad. I said, but it certainly tells me what the agenda will be for our next meeting. And he said, what's that? I said, priorities. And he said, what do you mean by that? I said, well, when we get so caught up in the things that come to us as a result of our sobriety that they interfere with what it takes to have our sobriety, our priorities are out of whack. And the old boy, I mean, he just turned gray. I mean, I didn't have to tongue lash him. He just turned gray, and he sat there and he said, "Oh shit!" he said, "I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'll be there." And that night he came to me. We had a good time with it, but it's either that or you're going to look goofy. He came in a tuxedo with a zebra cummerbund and a zebra tie. So I introduced him to everybody as the offspring of the mating of a penguin and a zebra. But we had a great time. We had a great time, and it's just, and he always told me, you talk about how, where your direction comes from. Intermittently, when we would be working on something, he would get this sort of defeated feeling. He'd say, he loves anesthesiology. That's his profession. For some reason, that's his thing. And he said, I'll never get back in that profession. They've told me I'll never get back in. And every time he'd say that, I would say, you know who you're talking to? You suppose that it would have meant much to me when I was sitting in a maximum custody joint if somebody said, well, you're going to be the warden one day. You think I would have believed that? And he'd say, oh, yeah, okay, I understand. Right now, he's back in his profession. It couldn't be done. Couldn't be done. But when God's got work for us to do, the barriers come down. But if I'm doing it my way, I'm going to lose far more than I win. And so it's not a matter of being a dedicated. It's a matter of plugging into the power and letting the power take me through life. Now, I could tell you stories forever about things that are living examples of what I'm talking about. I've had stuff happen that absolutely defied imagination, that defied my imagination. And so the spiritual life is not a theory. You got to live it, believe it, and trust it. My God, it's amazing what happens when I get plugged in and turned on. The 12-step is just about, say just about. It's really just about what I've been talking about. Having a spiritual awakening, having an awakened spirit. And geez, does that ever happen? It's almost like a transformation, to see. You see people around the program, and you don't recognize them a few years later. They look physically different. It's amazing what happens to folks. And to that transformation, certainly the spiritual awakening results in a whole bunch of other stuff. That's just Somebody called it a complete psychic change, a whole different outlook on life. And it's not a shabby promise. That's exactly what my experience has been, for sure. And then, having had that happen, my job is to share that with others. There's a thing. I had a secretary. I really liked it. I had a secretary that gave me one of those little old things you stick on the wall. That those things to live by that you put up, cliches mostly. And I like them. They're kind of cute. She gave me one that really struck me as significant to what I'm about. It said something close to this. I swear I got to get a better quoter. But it said close to this, that life breaks us all sometimes. We know about that, don't we? Life breaks us all. But we sometimes grow back strongest at the place we were broken. Talking to a welder at one time explained to me, and I've since checked it to see. A guy told me that when you weld two pieces of metal together and you do it well, the weld is stronger than the metal. Life breaks us all at times, but we sometimes grow back strongest where we were broken. In the book it says it a little different way, but it's the same thing. It says that our dark experience will become our greatest resource for helping others. I do a lot of stuff. I'm active in AA. I also have a lot of other things that I have strong feelings about and I'm supportive of and involved in with what I can. So I'm a guy who has many interests. I love jazz. I spend all the time I can listening to jazz. It puts me in a planet I like to visit. I like it. So I do a lot of stuff. But my fundamental mission is what we're doing here right now. See, the strongest thing I will ever have to offer anybody is the truth about how my life was broken and mended. I've got a lot of ideas about stuff, but my greatest gift will be the truth about that broken life and what brought it together and made it play. That's my gift. And I can do a lot of other stuff. Like I go to a church sometimes. I'm kind of a buzzard member. I go when somebody dies or they're eating. And I don't feel bad about that. It's a nice thing, and I kind of like it. And a lot of times the minister, we change minister, they'll come to see me because they see my name. They don't know who I am. And I always tell them what I do. I always say, well, what you're doing on Sunday morning, I'm usually doing the same thing somewhere else. It's just a different format, different venue, but same deal. I've never had a single minister to argue with it. Not a single one. Because, see, I think God's purpose for me is not to learn how to sing in the choir. That's wonderful. I'm glad somebody does that. But that's not me. It's not to teach Sunday school, and read a little book, tell somebody. I've got a vital experience that can be helpful to somebody. So do you. So do you. Every one of us has a story that somebody needs to hear. They don't need to hear mine. Somebody needs to hear Jim. Somebody needs to hear Marie. Somebody needs to hear your story. And that's what I'm talking about when that avenue of service opens. If I just selfishly back off and say, oh, no, not me, get somebody else, I'm the loser. I'm the loser. My favorite talk in AA, people ask me who my favorite speaker is, I'll tell you in a heartbeat. Somebody making their first talk. I don't care what they talk about. Just to watch them get up and to watch them struggle through. Watch them grow. Something else. So, to me, this whole key of what brings about the exuberance, what brings about the joy, what generates the enthusiasm, what gives the deep sense of satisfaction, What makes you so darn proud to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous? You just wish you could go shout it somewhere. It's not about how dry I get. You can hurry up and believe that. It's about the new life and how much I can be an active kind of channel in what I'm doing. The way that I'll just it'd be amazing. You go 3 days and then wish you had more time, but we don't. I tell you, I would sort of finish out I've already most of this I've kind of talked about, but let me just tell you what that means in real terms. Even I've alluded to it a bit. I'm not just a total dodo, but I take a pretty simple approach to stuff because I'm not such a simple dodo. But I have kind of simple beliefs about stuff. Like, I believe very much in miraculous things happening. I believe that. I don't believe that. I know that. But that they happen. But I have a kind of pragmatic interpretation of miracles. You know, that to me, a miracle is what happens when preparation and opportunity meet, and God handles the introduction. If I'm not prepared, no opportunity will have meaning to me. Or if I get it, I can't handle it. And if I get it, and vice versa. If I'm prepared to get no opportunity. So I believe preparation and opportunity are what happens. It's why it sounds like almost magical thinking to say that from the day I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous, I've never applied for a job. What I've done is taken every job that I had and did it to the best of my ability. And I've been recruited for every job since then. I've never asked for a transfer, promotion. Now, I did get some downers. I got some that I would have sooner not had. But when I look at it in the grand plan, that thing just took. Yeah, I won't go into this, but I have some beliefs in this thing about an inner compass. You know, that there's kind of an inner compass that's based on my principles and values and stuff like that. I give you one example. Where we live, a little place in North Carolina that is right by Pinehurst. And it's just a magnificent place. It looks like a lot like this with more pines and more golf courses. We got tons of them. And I just loved it. It's a very quiet, kind of elegant little village type look, and long pines and winding roads. And I just thought it was great. I first saw it in '60, and I almost bought a lot. And my God, I was traveling full time and always bought a lot. What for? You know, just to own dirt. I wish I had now. But it didn't make sense. But it's really something when you get something in your mind, you know, when you sort of get a fix on something that's important to you. And this is the God's truth. I never did one single thing deliberately to move to that area. Never did. Never did. But what happened was that my career took me there. And I wound up needing to live in the community. Now, I don't know if, I was offered a lot of jobs. Some I took, some I didn't. And when I look back, it was almost like that inner compass working. And if that ever entered my mind, I didn't know it. But I wound up being there. And so, I'm somebody who believes a lot in what's going on inside. And so my life has been replete with things that happened without any kind of overt action on my part. In that penitentiary. A lot of people ask me when I got out and how. And I was in there 2 years. And all I'm doing is doing what we're doing in Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't think I would ever get out. I knew they'd think about it sometime, but I didn't think I'd get out of there. I was doing what I do in AA, and I was having a real great experience in it. They called me up for special parole. I'd never heard of it. most other people hadn't. It happens once every 10,000 cases. I didn't get it, but they called me up for it. Yeah. That is unheard of. Yeah. And all they saw was a guy who was emerging in a new life. And the weight of the crime, I guess they said, no, we can't do that. That's too special for this guy. But it almost assured that the next time they reviewed me, I'd be gone. And so 3.5 years later, they released me on condition that I go to North Carolina. They didn't want me to stay in Michigan. And I don't blame them, I guess. And I came back. I didn't want to come to North Carolina. I'd been to the big city. I didn't want to go back to the back of the road. But it's the finest thing that ever happened. I had to grow up and sober up to appreciate my own town. So I went back. Went to work in a mill. And I just hated it. My job was sweeping the floor, 10 at night till 6 in the morning. I was a fine floor sweeper too. I was dangerous for that thing. Man, I was so didn't make much money. Made a little bit more than I made in prison. But I was exuberant about the job. I mean, I was absolutely grateful for that. And I had a couple folks offer me jobs. I'd had a sales history. I had some folks offer, but I knew some. It's like this promise that will intuitively know how to handle situations. Nobody's told me. But when people started talking to me about sales job, I said, no, I don't need to get in the fast lane too quick. And I stayed on a lousy job because I needed the security and stability. And so I stayed there. And real active in AA. I started sponsoring prison groups, started doing a lot of work. DCM in my area, I absolutely was like a young goat running wild. Man, I was going everywhere. Putting on public meetings at great expense. No, it was a great deal. And then 2 years after I was out, one day I got a phone call from the state capitol, and a guy introduced himself. I'd met him. He'd visited the AA group I sponsored in a prison there. And he said, Mr. Ivester, we're expanding rehabilitation in our prison system, and we were wondering if you would consider a position. And now, this had never been done in history. And I was startled, of course. I said, are you sure you know who you're talking to? And he said, oh, yeah, we've checked you out. And so he told me what they were doing. They were really just introducing rehabilitation in the program. There was nothing in there in any substance at all. And they wanted to get something going. And somehow or other, they decided to get a guy like me. Now, I'd finished 2 years at Michigan State while I was up there on a television type, whatever. 2 years. And that was all the training I had. And a whole bunch of training in the bar rooms. I had a lot of that. But I don't know who made the decision, but what a risk. What a gamble to break total precedent in the history of the country and say, we'll take one of these guys and try them out. And just as remarkably, not a single person ever discussed my history with me. Now, they knew about it, obviously. But in my entire career, I never had a single person say, boy, we're taking a big chance with you. The weight of the world's on your shoulders. Don't you screw it up. Never happened. And I went into the system. I had to make a decision whether I was going to be a hoodlum hero or a professional. And I just didn't have much stock in hoodlum heroes. So I decided if I was going to be there and I was going to take the job, then I needed to do the job. And I decided to be a professional. Finished up my education in correctional administration. And but more than anything else, I just gave my heart and soul to the work. I mean, I was doing something I loved. I'd have done it for nothing. And unfortunately, when you do good work, one of the byproducts is you go up. And I started moving up a little bit into some leadership roles. And one day, the head of our system asked me to stop by his office that he had an assignment. And normally he would want me to do something for him, speak for him somewhere or whatever. And went in, and he visited a minute, and he said, Tom, I'd like for you to take over an institution as warden. And, and I swear to God, that is still the most ludicrous sounding thing. I mean, who would ever think of something like that? I mean, my God, I never did. And I was just startled. I said, boss, God knows, man, I don't know if I didn't want to be the man. You know what I mean. I didn't want to be that. I wanted to duke it out with the guys and all that. I said, I don't know, boss, because I knew that first person feedback would be lost if I did that, and that was important. So I had some real issues about it, and I said, well, will you give me some time to think about it? He said, sure. Take 5 minutes. And I took it. I went out and prayed, went back and said, okay, I will. And but I saw that maybe with some in a position to have some authority, I might be able to do some things that were worthwhile. And even though I wouldn't get the first person feedback as much, I would be able to do something that had some substance. And so I did. And for the next 20 years, that's what I did. You can tell I got a kind of a reckless mind. I'm not a status quo person. I'm a developer. I'm somebody who I dream. I see things. I like to do stuff. I like to build and create. And it's kind of hard to do in a prison, because that's a fairly fixed environment. But didn't mean anything to me. I'm just somebody who likes to do stuff. And the prison he wanted me to take over was to capitalize on that trait of mine. He said, we have a number of facilities that are supposed to be community reintegration and orientation. He said, in my judgment, we don't have one. And I said, well, what would you like to do with it? Best training I've ever had in my life. He said, I'd like for you to go down there and develop one. That was the sum total of my guidance. And it's probably as fine a guidance as I've ever had. And I went down and gave it, anyway, that was the beginning of a long-term career. I told you a little bit of it intermittently that sometimes those bumps come sometimes. I had some bumps. It wasn't all a honeymoon, but it was all something that gave me an enormous sense of meaning and purpose, and a life that I wouldn't have traded for anything. I tell you, if you really want to know how to shut down a career, I worked 39 years, and then I found out I was the oldest guy in the system. I said, I'm getting out of here. And so I retired. And we were talking about this morning, when folks know that you've got some time and a willing heart, you can bet you're going to get something to do. I was elected to be the state chair of AA and Corrections to be effective on my retirement. So my retirement lasted 1 nanosecond, and the only difference is I moved to the other side of the fence, and now and I don't get paid. Now I pay. So but I wouldn't have it any other way. It's an absolutely marvelous thing, and so I've always told you that you think dreams come true. You think a hopeless case can go somewhere. Do you think there's hope here? Do you think there's a substantive way that you can do something with this sucker and turn it into a way of life second to none? That's what I hope this story's about. Yeah. Great being with you. Thanks.